I also just think that again, it comes from a place of something of privilege, depending on where people are. I mean, I'm very privileged, I can work from home, I've been teaching yoga and movement for nearly 20 years. I understand. For me, that's a pretty significant amount of privilege even. But I think to have the expectation that everybody should be able to do 60 or 90 minutes, it's exclusive. It's starting to leave people out of the practice of yoga or any sort of movement. And I don't think that's fair.
Hello and welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast. Today we are continuing the conversation about how yoga can help us in this sometimes very challenging role that we might have as parents. In our last episode, we heard from Claire about how yoga philosophy can support us as we raise these tiny humans into adulthood. Today, Naomi is talking with us about how her yoga practice changed when she became a parent and how she's used that information and that knowledge and that lived experience to bring yoga to not only other parents, but to really improve how she was teaching her classes. I cannot wait until you hear this. This is a great episode if you are a parent or if you are teaching parents in your yoga classes. And I also just want to say, I really believe that parenting is one of the most rewarding jobs out there, but also one of the most difficult. So I see you. And if you're new here, let me introduce myself and the podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. My pronouns are she, her, hers. This podcast is being recorded on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people who were here on Turtle Island long before my settler ancestors arrived. For me, it's really important to continue to learn about decolonization work, about how I can connect to my own roots and my own ancestry to really understand what brought me here to Turtle Island, but also to have a lot of compassion and empathy for the people who were here first, and also for their story of how they were harmed as Canadian settlers moved in. I'm a Canadian yoga teacher, a mom of 3, an entrepreneur, and a forever student who loves to ask questions, maybe too many questions. But that's why podcasting feels like a good fit. I love that we get to hang out together, listen to amazing yoga teachers like Naomi, and learn together. And this podcast was really born out of this feeling that I had when I left yoga teacher training and felt like I was out in the wilderness all on my own. What do I do now? How do I market my classes and run a small business and continue to learn about yoga? And I wanted yoga teachers to have a place where they could feel supported by a community and also by information, continue to learn. So you might be cleaning your house today or driving kids around or walking your dog, whatever it is. I love that you can take this information on the go. If you're a returning listener, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for hanging out. It means a lot to me. Also, what means a lot to me is our sponsorship. Today's episode is powered by OfferingTree. I use and love this software in my own business because it makes everything so much simpler. It's automated. The bookings, the payments, the Zoom links, reminders, so much more. And we have a special podcast listener discount code for you. That's over at OfferingTree.com/Shannon. Today's episode is also brought to you by Summer Biz Camp. This is hosted by Tristan Katz and Brooke Monahan, and they have no idea that I'm talking about this on the podcast at the very start. This is not a paid sponsorship. It's just a thing that I wanted to tell everyone about. Tristan and Brooke are going to be on the podcast in our next episode talking about why marketing isn't working right now like it used to. It's a brilliant episode. I cannot wait for you to hear from them on this. It's something that many yoga teachers are telling me, that they're struggling to make money right now, that they're struggling to get people to sign up for all kinds of offerings right now. And we're going to break it down and figure out why. I love that Brooke brings a lot of facts and analytics and numbers to the conversation. And Tristan really brings the knowledge and awareness of being a yoga teacher. And the two of them together are a dream team. It's really something. It's really exciting. And when I found out that they were leading a summer Biz Camp online, I knew that I had to tell you about it. So it starts June 26th. It goes until August 14th. It happens on Wednesdays from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern. And I'll make sure that I link to this in the show notes. So if you're on the go and listening, I'll link to that in the show notes. That's over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/374. Or you can search, Tristan Katz, Brooke Monahan, Summer Biz Camp. Today's episode is also brought to you by Pelvic Health Professionals. Last week, I shared some big news about Pelvic Health Professionals in the opening of last week's episode. So many of you might know that things are changing as of August the 1st, 2024. But let me give you the update that I am so happy about. I heard from many of our pelvic health professional members who are interested in taking over this business. So I shared an email with the members explaining that I'm really being pulled to focus more on growing vegetables and native plants in my garden and figuring out how to connect other people to growing food and being out in nature. And I just want to say, oh my gosh, the emails that I got in support of trying something new, doing something new, taking a big leap, it was overwhelming. It was really heartwarming, really overwhelming. I'm so grateful to those who sent me an email. And if things work out, which, it's kind of looking like they might, then Pelvic Health Professionals may stay open and running. So I'll keep you posted on the podcast as I learn, because I think it's helpful to hear what happens when things happen in a business. If you want to get into the membership and learn more about pelvic health, I'm going to let Claire, who was on the podcast last week as our guest, tell you about Pelvic Health Professionals and explain what the membership is like. So let's have a listen to Claire here.
So for me, Pelvic Health Professionals has been a wonderful opportunity to deepen my understanding of the pelvis. And as I love, Shannon always says that everyone has a pelvis. And within that, to not only navigate what can feel like a confusing and complicated area of the human anatomy, but to also connect with other professionals, not just yoga teachers, being a yoga teacher, but really hearing and learning what's happening and what's really current practice for physios, doulas, other birth professionals, chiropractors, exercise physiologists. It really, I think, helps have a more well-rounded experience and understanding, and also helps to understand what your scope of practice is and where you can either out-refer people or go to for your own professional support and learning. The other thing I really love about Pelvic Health Professionals is the biopsychosocial kind of approach that comes a lot in that. Again, as a yoga teacher, I would more call it kind of like the 5 kosas. So really looking at all the layers. My 2 favorite episodes or guest speaker calls that have been in there have been Leslie Howard talking about the energetics of the pelvis, which I think I hassled Shannon about getting her back onto that. But that is something I'd been so intrigued about for so long, and to hear someone with such experience talking about it was wonderful. Also really love people such as Carolyn Van Dyke and really talking about the not just the biopsychosocial approach, but again that alternative to just musculoskeletal and looking at a more holistic, rounded approach to that, supporting people with that area of the.
There you have it, connected yoga teachers. If you want to learn the most up-to-date pelvic health information, join us over at pelvichealthprofessionals.com. We have 3 live calls happening in June and July. And yes, you get access to the replays if you can't make it live. And I'll share more about the topics and our guests later in this episode. So now let's get into it. Today on the podcast, we're diving into a topic that may resonate with many of you: teaching yoga to busy parents. Whether you're a parent yourself who struggles to find time for your own movement practice on top of your hectic schedule, or if you work with parents who tell you that they don't have time for yoga now, this episode is going to be super helpful. Naomi Gottlieb-Miller joins me to share more about how we can support the community of busy parents in our yoga classes. Naomi is a mover, a maker, and a mom of 3 kids. She's been teaching yoga and movement since 2005 and is known for classes that are creative, playful, and strong. Naomi specializes in teaching short classes that pack a punch, making sure you can easily squeeze your daily movement into whatever pockets in your day you happen to have. On her website, you can find classes that are 5 to 30 minutes to ensure that you can incorporate movement into your day, no matter what. In our conversation, you'll hear how Naomi's yoga practice changed drastically when she became a parent and how that inspired her to teach much shorter classes online, which can be just as good or even better than longer yoga classes. She's doing really well with this in her yoga business, so you'll hear about that as well. Naomi and I also chat about how, as parents, we might not have the same amount of time. We also get into high expectations that we put on ourselves as moms. Naomi and I both talk about that. And also as yoga teachers and the double standard that society sometimes puts on parents and so much more. So I cannot wait for you to have a listen to this rich conversation. Let's dive in and learn from Naomi. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast, Naomi. It's so great to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I am as well, because we are going to chat about how do we fit yoga in when we are busy parents. This is something that I know very well, all through different ages and stages of my kids' lives. And even I would say like when we're busy people and we feel like our plates are full. This is a good episode. But before we get into the questions around this, tell us, what's the work that you do and who do you do it for?
Yeah, well, I have been a mover for as long as I can remember. And when I was young in college, so I was 18, I found yoga. And it wasn't until I finished college that I sort of realized that I wanted to teach it. I had this really powerful experience, I think like so many people do within the yoga space, of transformation, of recognizing my own ability to move my body in a way that felt really good, as opposed to moving my body as a form of punishment, or as a form of harm, which is where I'd come from movement prior to that. And so I wanted to teach it. But then, flash forward, God, I was 24 when I started teaching yoga. So that's almost 19 years ago. It's a long time ago. Flash forward until I was 32 and I had my first child. And my experience of movement radically changed. I had been teaching yoga for 8 years before I had a baby. And so I was, very good at moving my body whenever I wanted. I could go for a run in the middle of the day for as long as I wanted. I could do an hour and a half long practice, like in the morning or in the afternoon or whenever. It didn't matter, because, I taught yoga and my life was built around those classes, and all the other space in between was mine. But when I had a child, that radically changed. And I went from, being able to move my body whenever I wanted to all of a sudden, truly, this was me maybe 3 or 4 months postpartum, trying to do a yoga practice at 10:15 at night when my kid, who was not, and honestly still not, is a great sleeper. This is my oldest child. I was at 10:15 at night trying to do a little bit of movement because I could not figure out how to make movement happen in my life again in a way that made sense. And it took me really an entire year postpartum to, get into a groove again of consistent daily movement, which is what makes me feel most connected in my body, most grounded, most at home. And one of the things that really anchored me was saying, it doesn't have to be what it was before. It does not have to be what it looked like before, because for so long I was trying to make it what it looked like before. And when I realized that, things started to shift in terms of who I wanted to offer my classes to and how I wanted to share movement. And even then, it still took a little bit longer. At that point, I was still teaching in studios. I was still teaching in a much more conventional yoga space. And when I finally took my teaching online, so my husband joined the military later in life. He joined at the age of 30, which is highly unusual. And that meant that I had to leave the community that I'd taught in for, a decade. And I took my business online and I started teaching classes. And initially I was teaching these 60-minute long classes online, and they were hard for me as a mom of two young kids with a partner who was not around almost at all because of his military schedule, right? I was in a new place where I'd never lived before with no support. And I was trying to teach 60-minute classes online. And I realized this is insane. I'm not doing 60 minutes in my own practice. What other mom what am I trying to do? And so I completely changed the way that I approached teaching, and I started shortening my classes significantly. And so I started in my own online teaching practice, both in my online studio, but also in all of the content that I created. All of my classes are 30 minutes or less. Most are actually 15 minutes or less, and many are 5 to 8 minutes long. And it actually freed me up in my own movement practice to say, whatever I am doing for myself to move is good. Whatever I'm doing is good. It does not have to be 60 minutes or 30 minutes or even 10 minutes. It can be really short. And if that makes my body feel good, that is enough. And I think other human beings, but moms especially, need to hear that, because we have this tendency to feel like nothing that we do is enough. And so if that movement practice has this pressure to it of it has to be the pinnacle of movement, it has to be the most, then we're just not going to do it. We're going to stop before we start. So that completely transformed my teaching, to really shifting. I wanted to serve moms specifically, which does not mean that I only offer to moms, but when I share what I do in the world, I speak to moms specifically because I want them to hear the message, whatever you're doing is enough.
That's amazing. I love that you figured this out the hard way. So many things that you said rang true. Like, I remember after having my first child, Wyatt, thinking, what the heck was I doing with my time before this? Like, I was wasting my time. All of a sudden, it was just like, can I make sure that everyone has clean clothing and food and a bath at the end of the day? Like, and now I'm succeeding. And so fitting in a movement practice. I remember after Sage was born, my last baby, getting up at 4:45 in the morning, which can be really challenging with 3 kids, because I was like, okay, I need to fit this in. And I had put these high expectations on myself that I needed like an hour to an hour and a half of yoga. And, it's not sustainable for a long period of time. Not for me anyway, it wasn't. I was basically raising my kids most of the time as a single mom at that time when they were babies. And I wish that I would have heard someone like you saying, it's fine. Let's do 5 minutes together and then feel good and move on with our day. Um, I love this so much. There was something else that you said about the expectations on moms. And I was just thinking of just one example. When people come to our house, Sean and I really share in a lot of the cooking, but he loves cooking. And people will walk in our house, relatives or friends or whoever, and they're like, "Look at you, Sean." Like, I remember when my mom came to visit once when we were first dating, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, Sean, look at you making dinner." And he just thought, "Oh, she gets really excited about small things." But then he noticed, "Oh, she's not doing that to Shannon." So it was just the expectation that I would cook all the meals. That was the expectation by society. But then when he did it, it was like, "Wow, look at you." And so
Mhm.
I think it's wise when you're saying I'm not just focusing on moms, but that's really who I'm talking to in my marketing because of this kind of bit that's coming at us from society, I think, as moms.
Yeah. I mean, I think even when we know what we do, right? Even when we know we don't have to take that pressure on, even when we're told by partners or parents or even, wise women who say you don't have to take that messaging in, I think that we still often do because it's so hard to shake off. It's so hard to to say to ourselves, it's really okay if you don't if you don't cook as much, for example. It's really okay, if your husband or your partner, your spouse does all of the laundry. It's really okay. Or it's really okay, for example, if you are a parent who works outside of the home and your husband stays home with your kids. I mean, any of those things that sort of go against the expectations, culturally speaking, that we face, societally speaking, even though we know that we can push back against them, we still feel the weight of them.
Yes.
And so I do think that it is, I think that it requires like a generational shift. Do you know what I mean? I think that it's, for me at 42, I'm still feeling it. I'm hoping that my daughter, my oldest, who's 10, won't feel that same pressure quite as much. I'm hoping that by the time she's in a position, whether she has kids or not, is irrelevant to me. But when she's in a position as an adult to make decisions about what she should, in quotes, what she should be doing or not be doing, that she can take a step back and just say, what do I want to do? What do I need to do? And then if I'm partnered, how can we have conversations that, best support us together? I'm still not great at that. And I try, and so I think that even the movement piece fits into that because, I think about this actually with my husband. And I don't think he would be upset if I shared this because I talk about this a lot, but I fully expect that the kids are going to interrupt me when I've moved my body. I've been working from home since before they were born, and I've had all of my kids at home with me at various points of that time. So my youngest is 4, and we live in a very small town right now that has almost non-existent daycare or pre-K programs. They just fill it very quick. And we did not get her into one. So she's home with me, which is a bummer for both of us, really, in a lot of ways. I love her, but it's just, she's not, it's a bummer for both of us. We'll just leave it there. It's hard, right?
Yeah.
But I also had all 3 kids home at the start of the pandemic. And
Right.
I already had my online studio by then. I'd had it for 2 years before the pandemic started. And my youngest was an infant at that time, and my husband was deployed. And I was still trying to run my business and teach online classes then. And my point is more to say that I've had my kids at home with me for this entire time at varying points. So I expect them to interrupt my practice. I expect them to come in and need me to go do a thing while I'm lifting weights, for example, or while I'm doing something else. Whereas my husband has a lot more trouble handling that. He does not like to be interrupted. He gets upset when he gets interrupted. And his expectation is my workout time is my workout time.
Right.
And he has a lot of trouble working out at home, actually, for that reason. And it is not a criticism of him. It's again, it comes to expectations. The expectation for me is, oh, well, they're going to interrupt. I'm going to deal with it because I still want to move. And I have to be okay with the fact that they're going to interrupt me. His expectation is, this is time for me. I need you to give me space.
Right.
And what's wild is that for the most part, the kids actually understand those rules too. They
like, oh,
understand.
he's busy.
Oh, dad's moving right now. I got to stay away. Mom's moving. Cool. Mom, I need you to sign this form for school, and I need you to help me in the bathroom. I need you to do these things. And I think that's another thing that can be so hard, actually, is that if our expectations, again, for our practice are really high, I need the 30 minutes uninterrupted, we're never going to get anything done. But if you give yourself 5 minutes, you're a lot less likely to get interrupted, because it's a shorter period of time. And then maybe you can, if you don't get interrupted, you could do more.
Right.
Right. So, I think it's a really interesting dynamic there. I don't necessarily think one is better than the other. I don't think that wanting that space, because a lot of moms want that space. They don't want to be interrupted. They're like my husband. They're, stay away from my mat, or I have to leave the house to move because if not, I'm never going to get it done. I totally understand that also. And that just has never been an option for me.
Yeah.
So it became a necessity to say, okay, my practices are short and I'm just not going to get upset when you interrupt because I understand that's a reality and I'm going to move on with my life and try to move a little bit more later. It's just what it's going to be.
So true. Oh my gosh. I love this that, you're feeling the expectation. I have felt that definitely just society wise. And it sounds like both you and I are trying to push against that, but still it's there. And the expectation around the length of your practice, I hear this so often from yoga teachers. Yoga teachers are like, how can I be a yoga teacher if I can't fit in a 60-minute practice every single day or a 30-minute practice every day, or at least practice like an hour a week or something like that? What would you tell the busy yoga teacher? They're running their own business, teaching yoga, sharing yoga out into the world. We know the benefits of a self practice. And what would you tell the one that is like, I'm so busy? Maybe that's with kids or pets or parents or whatever. How would you convince them? Okay, here's a short practice. And then also, what might that look like?
Oh, yeah. So it's a great question. Mostly too, because I think that, and this, it's a sort of separate thing, but we also tend to think that all yoga practices are better when they're longer, or
Yeah.
that, you know, that it's not as legitimate if it's a shorter practice.
Yeah.
And, what I would say is, why are we putting value judgments on the length of time? Why are we saying 60 minutes is somehow superior? There isn't really scientific evidence, if we're going to go science, to back that up. Movement is movement. And I even think of it from the perspective of, as someone who, I started teaching in the world of 90-minute classes. I've been teaching since 2005. So I started teaching in a world where 90-minute classes were the standard.
Me too.
And yeah, and then there were some studios, because I was teaching, in the DC area, because I grew up in the DC area and then moved back to the DC area when I started my teacher training. And so we're talking Washington, DC, Maryland, Virginia. It's where I grew up. And I was teaching in DC proper, in Washington, DC, and in suburban Maryland, right? So in the suburbs, you would see more 90-minute classes. And in the city, you started to see 75-minute classes and 60-minute classes. And I remember some people saying, oh, how could I possibly fit everything into 60 minutes?
Yeah.
I don't think that I could. And now I'm saying you can actually fit a lot into 8 minutes.
Right.
You can fit an enormous amount. I have a program called the Daily 5. It's 5-minute practices that are yoga or just mobility type movement, body weight strength, and then strength training with actual weights. You can fit a lot into 5 minutes. We tend to have it in our heads, though, that yoga practices in particular have to follow a particular formula. You have to have the warm up, right? And if you're very traditional, there should be, even for an individual practice, a centering and, a meditation and breath work, and then you start moving.
Right.
And it's this warm up that's very, just very intentional and long, and it leads you into this series of standing poses that prepare you for your arm balances or your back bends or your whatevers and this and that. And then you hit your peak pose and then you start to gently cool down and you ease yourself into a shavasana. And it's like, that's lovely. It's also impractical on a regular basis,
Right.
So if I was going to say that to anyone, I would say that, first of all, your home practice does not need to look like the classes that you teach. Your home practice should look like what you need.
Right.
Your home practice might be like 2 straight minutes of cat cow and then a minute of child's pose. And then you lie on your back for the rest of the time that you're there and call it good if that's what you need. Your home practice could be 5 handstands at a wall. And that's what you need. If you look at your home practice as it has to look like what you teach, then you're going to get caught in this feedback loop of perfection and expectation instead of actually listening to what your body needs and then addressing that and moving to that. And I think that also yoga teachers often use their practices. I'm one of them, but we use our practices to inform what we're going to teach. That's also fine. You still don't necessarily need to teach your exact home practice, and your home practice doesn't have to be exactly what you teach. There are lots of things that I don't teach that I do in my home practice because my students don't need to do those things and they're not relevant for them.
Right.
So again, you have to be able to separate those things. And be able to listen to your own needs. And I think that is also really crucial. I will also say that, my students in particular, one of my students said after one of my 8-minute classes, she said, I never cease to be amazed at how much you can pack into 8 minutes.
That's amazing.
And it's not all like hard chaturanga forever. I don't do sun salutations almost ever. I teach creative flow and mobility and movement and strength training and other stuff, but I leave the sun salutations out of it for the most part for a number of reasons. But I pack a lot into 8 minutes because you can do a lot in 8 minutes. And I think we just need to reframe what we think is necessary for both home practice and what we teach.
Yeah. Your 5-day thing, can people access that?
Oh yeah. Well, so the daily 5 is I teach it once a year, usually in February. And not use my mouth right now. I usually teach it once a year in February or March, but it's always up on my website, so it can actually be accessed anytime. But it's 28 days of 5-minute practices for an entire month.
Love that. I love that so much.
Yeah. I mean, I love it too because because I made it. No, but it's because sometimes it's what I need too.
Yeah.
And what a lot of people say when they do that particular program is, wow, first of all, I never thought that I could do so much in 5 minutes. And then also what's really interesting is there's some people who say, particularly for the strength training ones, because with the ones that are strength training, I don't give any warm up. We just go right in, and it's okay. This is what we're doing. This is the strength set. This is the first exercise. This is the second exercise. You get a minute rest. Then you get to do it again. And then we're done. That's 5 minutes.
Right.
And what a lot of people say after that is, I actually had 3 more minutes and I was able to do 3 sets of this strength training practice. And so a lot of people will do the daily 5 and they'll say, I was actually amazed that not only could I very easily do this most days, maybe not every day, but most days, but I could then do more. I was able to do more.
Yeah. That's what I found when I put like this limit on my daily practice. If I said, okay, I'm going to show up for myself for 5 minutes a day, I could decide, oh, actually, I have a little more time to like roll around on the floor or lie here or do whatever, jump around and dance to a song, whatever. But I didn't put that expectation on the next day. That was important to me to not say, well, I did 15 minutes yesterday. I could do 15 minutes again. No, I always kept it to that short 5 minutes. The perfectionist in me needed that.
Yeah.
Connected yoga teachers, I'm popping in here for a moment to tell you about OfferingTree. So yes, they sponsor the podcast, That brings it to your ears today. But I also use OfferingTree myself because they make everything so automatic. So any yoga series that I've hosted online this year has all been done through OfferingTree because I love that the Zoom links get sent out automatically. Time zones are accounted for. I don't have to think about them. Reminder emails and texts go out, and the waivers get signed, and that's all automatic. Everything happens automatically. People can pay online. I can set up different payment structures. It really has everything I need. And when I go to put an offering together, let's say I forget, like, oh gosh, what time is it at? Or what's the description? All of that is included. So I never forget any of the really pertinent information needed. If you want to check out OfferingTree, maybe you need a booking software or you want to build a website, head on over to OfferingTree.com/Shannon because we have a special podcast listener discount code for you. That's OfferingTree.com/Shannon. Alrighty, let's get back into today's episode with Naomi. If you were working, if there was a busy parent in front of you right now and they were like, the nervous system is just really stimulated, really in overdrive, which many of our nervous systems are right now, just with the way the world is right now, what would be just one thing that you would get them to do or one practice?
So if they were really just in full disconnect, right? Nervous system is spiraling out of control. And what I think that tends to look like and feel like is you start to get out of your body. It's like you're no longer really in your body. You're up here in your head and then you're out.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're so spun up is you need to lie down. So one of the things that I do, it's something that's been in my practice for, almost 20 years now, is, rolling up 2 blankets together long ways so that you can fit your head and your entire spine. So your head goes on one end, your tush goes on the other, your knees are bent, and you lay back and you're just there and you breathe. That's one. And that's one that I've been doing for myself a lot lately. But also just cat-cow, just move your spine, move your body. And that can be done in a chair. That doesn't have to be done hands on the ground. You can sit in a chair, put your hands on your knees, around, back, pull forward. It does not have to be there. It would be a single pose. Like it would always be do a single thing. Just do one.
Right.
Because if your nervous system is in overdrive, you don't need extra. You need less.
Mm-hmm.
You need a thing. So if nervous system is overdrive, it might be go for a walk, go outside.
Right.
Even if it's raining, even if the weather is bad, go outside, put your hand out into the rain and feel it. Oftentimes we need a connection back to our body. So it might just be like squeeze your wrist or massage your hand, massage your feet, anything that gives you a tangible sense of being in your body. I love movement. I have forever. But one of the things that I frequently say, I said this in my class this morning when I taught live, I said, we want movement to fix things. We want to say, if you move your body, everything's going to be okay.
Right.
If you move your body, the stress is going to go away. Your anxiety is going to go away. Your depression is going to go away. It's going to fix all the things, but that's not what happens. What I find happens, and, I'm a movement professional, and that is the extent of my lane here, but what happens is that when you move your body, you just have the ability to be more in your body. Right? It's hard to avoid your body when you are moving your body.
Yeah.
And so if you can just move your body a little bit, it's not so much that it's not that it takes all the hard stuff away. It's not that it erases things or it makes your anxiety diminish or anything like that. It allows you to move, I think, from a more grounded place, right? A more embodied place. So it doesn't fix things, but it gives you more of that, that's a sound effect, but that into your body.
Right.
Right? Of, okay, I'm here. I can handle this, I can deal with this, or I might not be able to handle this. Being in my body is helping me recognize I really can't handle this at all. And I need help. I think that's the thing. You need a simple way to be in your body.
And so what about for the person who is feeling like, "Oh my gosh, I can't get off the couch. I am not feeling motivated at all. I just like I recognize this as the days get shorter here in Canada. Like today's an exception. It's 18 degrees, but I know the snow is coming. It is coming in a couple of weeks here, and the days are really short. So, what are some of the things that you like, maybe an idea or two for, just kind of feeling like my energy's low and I'd like a little more energy.
Yeah. I mean, it's really tough, right? Motivation is fickle.
Yeah.
Motivation is super fickle. I think there are a lot of ways to approach that, right? I think that the most basic way is if you're sitting on the couch and you say to yourself, I really want to move, but I can't get up, then you don't get up. You can take a twist sitting at the couch.
Right.
You can say to yourself, if this is all that I can do, maybe I can just roll my shoulders, right? Maybe I can do that. Maybe I can bring my right hand to my left knee and twist. Maybe I can do that. Does that make me feel better? Is the movement helping? I think also one of the great tools that yoga gives us is a sense of connection, right? It's that body-mind connection. We talk about it all the time in yoga. And it's not so much that it doesn't exist in other movement modalities, it's that we're just trained more in the yoga world to pay attention to that. And so I think it's always then asking the question, okay, I'm moving. Do I feel better? Do I feel the same? Do I actually feel worse? It's not, because I think it's a very loaded question to say, do I feel better now? It's more like, how do I feel? And then expand it to, do I feel better, the same, or worse? If I move a little bit more, will that make me feel better, the same, or worse?
Right.
Right. And I think that, you start from that place. I also think just from a habit change perspective, because this is also an area of expertise for me. I've studied habit change and habit science for really a decade now as well. And, sometimes you need a reminder from old you who's done it before to current you. So when I was trying to revive my meditation practice after we moved from the DC area to Texas, and I had two small children and I was alone all the time, and I knew that I needed more grounding in my life and I wanted to sit in meditation again, I had a sign in my kitchen and it was above the stove and it said, meditate now. And it was just this reminder where I could, meditate now. And it was really to meditate in the morning, right when I woke up. But sometimes I would just look at that sign and I would say, oh, okay. And I would stop right where I was. I'd be standing, put my arms down, maybe put my hands on my belly or one hand on my chest, one hand on my belly, and I would just breathe.
Right.
And, again, that doesn't fix anything. We want to assign so much more power to yoga and to movement, and because we want things to be miracle fixes, right? But I just think it keeps coming back to, okay, I can do this for a minute, or I can do this for a breath, or, I can give myself this time. And if I had that sign there, it would remind me, okay, this is a moment that I can do that. And so one of the ways when it comes to habit change is, if it's something that's new, or if it's something that you have a little bit of resistance to, you either have to make it exceedingly easy, right? Like so easy that you can't say no to it, right? So that would be like a 5-minute practice that you get delivered to your inbox every day. Or, another movement program that I have is the Power of One, where it's literally a single movement every day and that's it, or, so it's how ridiculously easy can it be? And you do that. Or I need a reminder. I need a physical reminder that tells me movement makes my body feel good. And if I move my body, if I get up off the couch and like swing my legs a little bit, that's actually going to make me feel better. So it's like having that little card that you place somewhere, or some people have like an actual touchstone, like they have a stone that they carry around in their pocket, or something that is a physical reminder that you can rub and you say, oh yeah, this is my movement stone. I know that if I move my body, I'm going to feel better. So again, I think there's I do want to address the idea that there's a chasm of difference between, suffering from something like depression or anxiety, which, is very real and very serious and is not necessarily solved easily or quickly by movement or anything. And, just sort of feeling that seasonal shift of, oh, it's getting dark out earlier. It's dark forever. This sucks. I don't want to do anything. I think there is a chasm of difference between those things. And I think with something in the one that I just described, which is that seasonal thing where you're just really not interested in doing anything at all, you sometimes just need that touchstone, that reminder, that simplicity. Whereas with something much more serious, you need to talk to a professional. You need professional help. There's nothing that I can do for that person other than be supportive.
Yeah.
Zero things that I can do other than be supportive and just say, I'm here for you when you need me. I have yoga and movement practices and meditation when you need it, but you might need more than that. And that's also okay. That's really okay.
That's a great reminder for us as yoga teachers when people come in and they're telling us like how they're feeling and how they're doing. I have a logistic question. If you teach an 8-minute class online, how does that work in terms of charging? Because my guess is that people are like, oh, I like an hour-long class. And then if I show up to your class and it's 8 minutes, I might want to pay less.
So the way that I structure my offering, so I have an online studio. The online studio has 2 tiers, right? So there's one tier that has access to 5 classes live during the week, right? So 3 of those are 30-minute classes and 2 of those are 15-minute classes. Okay. And the 30-minute classes are all recorded and they're put in the archives and you can access them at any time. The second tier, and then they have everything else in the online studio. The second tier, they don't get access to the 30-minute classes. They only get access to the 15-minute live classes on Tuesday and Thursday, and then all of the shorter classes in my online studio. So they get the 15-minute classes, the 8-minute classes, the 5-minute warm-ups, all of that, right? So they get all of that as part of being a member. So I don't offer 8-minute classes live because I also think people would struggle to show up for something like that.
Right.
Right. People do show up for the 15-minute classes, and people show up for the 30-minute classes, but showing up for an 8-minute class, I think there's a challenge to that. In the courses that I offer too, I have classes that range from usually 10 minutes, but there's some that are slightly shorter, 8 minutes to 20, right? So I have movement for healthy core, movement for healthy shoulders, movement for healthy hips. And I create those also to fit into a very busy mom or otherwise life, so I want you to be able to do as much of that practice as possible.
Right.
So even there, it's like, that's part of the bundle. So you're not, if you were to take a live class with me, I don't offer live classes publicly in that way, mostly because the logistics of that are just exhausting. I find trying to constantly promote live classes to be exhausting. And I find that having an online studio where I can pull everything together in one place, or having a very specific program where I can pull everything into one place, makes it so much simpler.
Yeah.
So I was talking to someone else about, why I think it's really hard for moms to get back in the mat postpartum. And that one of the things is that there just aren't a lot of short online classes, is that a lot of teachers gear their classes towards people as though they're teaching them in a studio, and teaching online is completely different. It's not the same. I mean, there are a lot of similarities, but it's just not the same as teaching in a studio.
Yeah.
And so you have to approach it very differently. And so, I said, once I finally figured it out and I started teaching 15-minute, 30-minute long classes, and then eventually 8-minute classes, and those are the 8-minute flows. We just get right into it, and that's what it is. But once I started doing that, I thought, it's really a barrier to go back to studios where the studios are 75 minutes long and you have to drive there and it's like 30 minutes to get there maybe, and the parking is insane. And I just thought, what if studios offered 30-minute classes for moms? Like, I know that would feel maybe too short in some ways for some people, but I just thought that might lower a barrier for moms because if you have to get a babysitter for 2 hours to go to a yoga class, for example, or if you are fortunate enough to have kids in daycare and you can just go to a class, but then you have to get back at a certain time and all of that, it's really tough, so what if you could just go to a 30-minute class and then be done. And like on the way home, go get yourself a muffin and a tea and, have that time. I feel like because they're so long, that can also be a barrier too. So I don't know. It's something that I think about a lot in terms of what are the barriers, for moms, and time really is, I think, time and babysitting. Those are the biggest ones, I feel like.
I love that you developed this because people need this. You found out that you needed it. You see that other people need it. It's working. And I just want to highlight there that you were like, I offer these 2 tiers and people choose what they want and this is how it works. Like you've created it based on the need. And I think there might be some yoga teachers who are listening and thinking, "Oh, I want to do the same thing, but I'm worried like, oh, people are going to pay me less or is anybody going to show up?" So I love that you're sharing, here's what works for me. Like pre-recorded 8-minute classes works really well. People are showing up live for 15 minutes. And I would tell our teachers, try it out and see what works. Also, I love that the barriers are down in terms of, I'm just thinking, if I could have jumped online, this wasn't even available when I had my first child. I don't even think we had internet. I'm trying to remember if we did. But 25 years ago, I don't think so. Not at our house anyway. And so if I could have hopped on and just there was a recording and it was like, here's a 5-minute practice or an 8-minute practice or a 15-minute practice, and I could do it with my kids running around the house, what a difference that would make in my life. I had a VHS tape and it was like the same yoga every single day. and that was like as good as it would get. And then going to a class. Yeah. So there might also be a barrier coming up for our listeners thinking, well, you know, are we just getting too rushed in society? They might have heard us talking about 90-minute classes. In yoga teacher training, we used to teach 2-hour classes. You're the same, you're nodding, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What would you say if people are thinking, well, more is better? What if they're still thinking, or like, let's spend more time, let's not be so rushed?
Well, I also think, and I think that's a good point. I also just think that again, it comes from a place of something of privilege,
Yeah.
depending on where people are. I mean, I'm very privileged, I can work from home.
Right.
I've been teaching yoga and movement for nearly 20 years. I understand that for me, like that's a pretty significant amount of privilege even. But I think to have the expectation that everybody should be able to do 60 or 90 minutes it's exclusive. Like it's starting to leave people out of the practice of yoga or any sort of movement.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's fair. I also want to note that some of my 15-minute classes are mellow classes that end with a restorative.
Right.
That, in my online studio, the 15-minute classes that I record, one of them is a focused class that really focuses on whatever we're teaching that month. I break them down by pose or strength exercise. And so I spend a lot of time in that 15-minute class teaching very specifically, this is what we're working on this month. Right. Then I do a flow that's fun, fast paced, but it starts slow. Like I don't only have moms in my online studio. I think, I don't know how old my oldest student is, and it really doesn't matter, but I have women from their early 30s. I think I have one student who's in her late 20s who actually taught when she was a teenager, when I was in my 20s teaching teens years ago. So she actually might be in her 30s now because I can't do math. But anyway, she, I have, spanning like either late 20s, early 30s to mid 70s.
Right.
So I know very well that I can't speed my students through a class. There are some things where I'm just going to keep it slow. And then the 8-minute classes, they start slow, but I build and I pick them up, and people know what they're getting into when they do them.
Yeah.
So, I would say to people who think that I don't feel defensive about this or attacked, but I don't necessarily think that a 15-minute practice means that you're rushing things.
Right.
You could do a 15-minute practice that is comprised of 3 poses. You could do a 15-minute practice that's all seated.
Right. You could do a 2-hour practice where you're like thinking about your grocery list for 2 hours or something completely different. Right. And you could do a 15-minute practice where you're like really present. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think that 15 minutes doesn't mean rushed. 15 minutes means we're using the time that we have to move, like whatever time you have. So if you have time to move your body and you want something more dynamic, cool. If you want something more mellow, I have that for you every month also. I offer meditations in my online studio, and my meditations are all between like 9 minutes and 18 minutes ish. Like I don't offer 30-minute seated meditations. That's epic. And I'm impressed when people can do that. But in my own meditation practice, when I get to it, it is the door shuts when my oldest 2 go to school. They go to get on the bus. And then on a good day, I didn't today, but on good days where I don't have something else that really needs to get done, I immediately go sit on my couch, cross my legs, close my eyes, and I breathe for as long as I feel like it. And then I get up. Again, I think it's like putting a value on length of time. I think there's a little bit of a logical fallacy there,
Right.
where if you only believe that longer classes are good classes, then you're missing out in some capacity, and you're also losing students.
I love how you said this. And let's remember, time is completely made up.
Yes. Time is a construct, and at the same time, I think as moms, our time is precious.
Oh yeah.
Right? Our time is precious. And so I think sometimes another barrier, and I don't, I think, even talk about this enough when I do, but it just sort of came to me right now that because our time is precious, sometimes we don't value ourselves enough or movement enough.
Yeah.
And that we think, oh, I've got to make a nutritious lunch for the kids, or I have to do the laundry instead, or I have to do this other thing. And the movement's just not as important because it takes too much time.
Yeah.
And again, it's, if we just set that aside and say, no, our time is precious, I am precious. Even if I give myself 2 minutes to do cat cow, even if I give myself, a triangle pose just to like get that expansion through my chest, that is better than saying to myself, I'm not worthy of movement because other things are always more important.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's so true.
Or that I'm rushing myself. It's like, no, I am giving myself what I have time for, and that is enough. The end.
Oh yeah. I would love to hear from our listeners if they have learned along the way, like what works for their brain to give themselves that time to let themselves know, okay, this is enough. I'm doing enough. If people have questions for you as well about how you run your business and how you teach to busy parents, I'd love for them to put it in the show notes, and we'll include a link, and we'll also include links to all of your website and all of your things, your social media as well. I appreciate this conversation so much. I feel like you've kind of given us permission to move. I hope people, after they've had to listen to this, go do something that feels really good for their body. So thank you so much for doing the work that you're doing. This is inspiring.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for hearing it. And thank you for having me. It means a lot to be able to talk about it.
Thank you so much, Naomi, for this podcast episode today that we finally got to release because we recorded it so long ago, but also for speaking up for peace in these really difficult times. Naomi is someone who has shared with me and her Instagram followers the things that she faces as a Jewish person who's speaking up for a bilateral ceasefire, along with talking about the anti-Semitism that she and her children and her family have faced. Naomi stays engaged and educated about what's happening with Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. She posts bravely about this. And her and I have been learning in community for months now, which means we listen to each other. We have different perspectives and opinions sometimes. And sometimes that's messy. And what I appreciate so much is that we both continue to show up, even when it gets really messy. Because the common thread is that we both believe strongly in human rights, peace, and freedom. And we also deeply care for the earth and children. So go follow Naomi on Instagram if you're on there and show her some love. And if there is someone in your life who's up for learning and unlearning and hearing different perspectives in community, please take a moment and send them some gratitude. When I have conversations like this, I feel like it's a real gift when someone will just be honest with you about what they think, that someone doesn't think, oh, well, maybe I won't say that because, all the inner people pleasing that we do, or we're afraid to lose connections with people. And that makes a lot of sense. It's a real gift when we can find connections with people who will hold on through some of those disagreements and some of that mess. And so I just want to say a huge thank you to Naomi for doing that. While I'm recording this podcast today, I just attended a grief cafe, and I'm so grateful for this group of 230 people who showed up today online. It was an emergency grief cafe because collectively we just saw horrific videos and news coming out of what was supposed to be a safe zone in Rafah, where families were sheltering in tents and where we just saw that these families and a lot of children were attacked overnight by Israeli leaders and military. And I know that this morning I was almost feeling numb to things. I wouldn't say I had a normal amount of grief or anger showing up in what we're witnessing. And going to the grief cafe and hearing from other people who were sort of feeling the same, like this disconnected, the grief and the anger and the sadness and the hopelessness or helplessness or both were kind of sitting under the surface. And I know the importance of connecting with those emotions as they're coming up. I also know the importance of witnessing and continue to bear witness and continue to see the things that are happening in the world if we can handle it. And I'm telling you, me as a white person with privilege, there are days where I question, can I handle this? And if you are living in safety and you have a roof over your head and, you're supported and you have all your needs met, you likely can handle this. And I think that it's a really amazing privilege to have food on the table, a roof over our head, community and family around us. And if you're in that space, I'm hoping that you'll join us in speaking up for the people in Rafah right now. Huge thank you to Sasha, who hosts these grief cafes. I'll link to Sasha in the show notes. I'll link to her Instagram. They happen quite often. I'm so glad that I could go today. And then I'm also looking at what can I do now? And I'm going to call my local representative again this week. Alex loves to hear from me. I'll tell you, I do talk to Alex when I call him. I book an appointment, and the last time I called, the person taking the message was like, what would you like to talk about? And I said, I'd like to talk about what's happening in Gaza right now. And then I also said, I also want to talk about reproductive rights. And you know what? That's the thing that got me through. He wanted to clarify for me as a Canadian that is still something that's important to his party. But he did make time to talk to me about also what's happening in Gaza. And I'm going to continue to call him. And do I think it's going to change his mind? No, but it's one thing that I can do. See, I am very determined. Feel free to be this determined. I think sometimes our local representatives don't know how much this means to us. Okay, what else am I doing? I'm wearing my Free Palestine shirt right now, today. I try and wear it out whenever I can. I'm also starting to look at where my money and my time are invested. I want to make sure that I am not in any way funding harm that we are seeing right now. So these are things that we can do together when we collectively want the same thing. We want peace and equality for all humans. And I just want to say thank you for being that person. Thank you for doing yoga off the mat. And I'm really curious, what are you doing to speak up for social justice right now? Maybe it's something completely different, and I'd love to hear about it. So share in the show notes. That's over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/374. I'd love to hear about it. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, if it's helping you in any way, we love it when you leave us a review. You can do that in iTunes. It's a real big gift when you leave us a review. Oh yeah, I told you that I was going to give more details if you wanted to meet up in person online. We have 3 more calls inside of Pelvic Health Professionals happening in June and July. 3 calls for sure. And we'll see. Maybe things will continue on after July, or maybe I'll be passing the torch over to someone else who's running Pelvic Health Professionals. Okay, so let me tell you where I will definitely be. So June the 10th, we're talking with Dr. Elisa Folden, and we're talking about weight-inclusive fitness and wellness care. Now, let me just check my dates here. That's today if you're listening in real time. But if you're like, oh, shoot, I want to access that and I missed it, don't worry. There's a replay over at pelvichealthprofessionals.com. Also, July 15th, I'm really excited that Anne-Marie McQueen is coming in to talk with us about anxiety and sleep issues in perimenopause, because some of our members had questions about this. So we are excited to host Anne-Marie McQueen and find out, what if we can't sleep? What if we're having anxiety? And what does this have to do with perimenopause? And then at the end of July, on the 29th, I think that's the date we've chosen. It is. We're either having a call where it's like, we're closing Pelvic Health Professionals, but I just have a feeling that maybe instead that call is going to be, here's what's happening going forward with Pelvic Health Professionals, and then introducing all of you to whoever is running the show over there now. So that's exciting. Stay tuned and visit pelvichealthprofessionals.com to join. So if you've been sitting on the fence and you're like, well, I wanted to join, you still have a couple of months to get in there and soak up all of the information, learn from some of the most amazing pelvic health professionals around. And it's a monthly subscription, so you can sign up and stay in as long as you'd like to learn and then leave whenever you need to. Next episode on the podcast, as I said, and we've been working on kind of bumping this episode up because so many yoga teachers are telling us that they are struggling to make money. They're struggling to fill their offerings and they're struggling to market right now. And it's because marketing has changed. And I'm so excited that Tristan and Brooke are going to be here talking with us. So I'll see you back here for that chat in a couple of weeks. And as I sign off, I want to say a huge thank you to our team over here, Suzanne, Crunch, and Sinead. Oh my gosh, these humans are doing amazing work for the podcast, for our community, but also other amazing work out in the world. So let's all just pause and send them some love for bringing this podcast together. Oh my gosh, I'm so grateful for them. Each and every week. I just think, oh my gosh, they're so amazing. Every freaking week, I think that. Okay, thank you also to you, dear listener. I also think about you often. Oh my gosh, I love to get tagged on Instagram, on Facebook. I love to see the conversations that are happening in the Connected Yoga Teacher group. our Facebook group. I love to see your comments on our show notes pages. I'd love to get emails back from all of you. If you're not getting our email, head over to our website, get on our email list. That's where more conversation happens over there. If you'd rather like a written conversation, probably not if you're here all the way to the end of today's podcast episode. But I just want to say that there are so many ways that we have connected, and maybe we've never connected, but it means the world to me that you are here and listening. We're learning together, and yeah, I'm just incredibly grateful for you. So I'm going to take another little pause here and feel that gratitude. And also, I'm going to leave you with the same question that I've been asking for years, I think. What will you be doing to stay connected this week? To yourself, your yoga practice, and to your community, so that you can share the yoga that lights you up.